Let me hope that I confine myself to a few words plus, according to his instruction, the MC instruction.
No instructions. you can
And
speak as long as you wish.
of course, I want to say something out of the depth of my heart about the Buddha and about Buddhism. I think that's more important than perhaps even all these preliminary remarks. But the remarks, the preliminary remarks are, I think, what I really also want to say. And I'm also touched that a number of important guests and other, of course, they're all important, but there are also other members who spent a lot of time yesterday at my felicitation ceremony, and had a dinner also, and then went back to their residences, and again they had to rush here today, and they make it a point to come. So that is something that I feel very much, and I like to express my gratitude. And also I want to take this opportunity to add a couple of words that I intended to say, but I didn't do it during the finishing ceremony, because I was told that each speaker should have only 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah, okay. So firstly, an add-on, I want to say that I had wanted to express my gratitude to the people who have made the felicitation ceremony a great success, a very inspiring event. And my birthday was not at all, and is not at all, and will not at all be important, because I'm a Buddhist monk, and according to my principle, I don't encourage devotee to celebrate my birthday. But yesterday I made it an exception and accepted that, because of the very kind feelings of those who are organizing the felicitation event. Another add-on is that there are a couple of people I want to thank especially, and I want to mention Dr. Gao Mingyuan, our very good student. And as I understand, he was the first to propose that a volume, felicitation volume, be compiled and offered to me on my birthday. That was something like 2 years ago, and they started, and they wanted to do it on my 70th birthday. And since then they were working hard, and at first they were very enthusiastic. They they invited some very important scholars, and then, but they are worried because they were told that they had to submit their essay within 6 months. So some very honored scholars said, it's just not possible for me. Even if you give me 1 year's time, I wouldn't be able to complete it. So at least 2-3 scholars like this, in spite of their willingness to participate, but they could not do it. And also one scholar from Taiwan, and he very much, I know him very well. This is Professor Lin Zhengguo. He wanted to contribute, but we told him too late. And he tried very, very hard. At the end, he just simply couldn't make it. And he wrote to me and expressed his disappointment. So also Yanananda, Dr. Yanananda, has spent a lot of time, effort, doing all the computer work together with Dr. Gao to make sure that the volume came out successfully. And so there are so many other people involved, and therefore I just thank everybody in general, because as I said in the meeting, I felt that I was overwhelmed and overjoyed, not because it was my felicitation or my birthday, but because I witnessed for the first time, after my arrival in Hong Kong, for the first time, this willingness in participating in the perpetuation, promotion of an important Buddhist tradition. There's a tradition of paying gratitude, respect to an esteemed colleague and a teacher. Of course, I'm not saying that I'm worthy of the esteem or worthy of the respect, but the feeling is a feeling. A feeling is something I want to emphasize even today. That's very important quality of human nature. And these people came together and they worked hard and overcame a lot of difficulties, and they brought the events to a success. BDC has done whatever they could. In fact, we spent money buying 200 copies, and that basically settled the bill that the Center of Buddhist Study had to pay for the printing of the book. We bought 200 copies and spent nearly 60,000. Yeah, and also yesterday, as I understand, some of our members, some of our students contributed to the expenses in the organization. So all these are feelings, overwhelming feeling for me. I feel happy that people are being made aware of the importance of the tradition of felicitation of teachers. And as I said, this is actually in other countries a very prevalent, very common practice among the Buddhists, such as in Sri Lanka. I have participated in many of these celebrations, and I myself, as you know, I think, edited 2 volumes for them, for two of our teachers. And I wanted to edit one more because I have a very highly respected teacher who taught me Sanskrit when I was at Kelaniya. He's now 90 years old. I just saw him recently. Every time when I went back to Sri Lanka, I make a point to visit him. This is part and parcel of tradition. And tradition is what I want to emphasize. And today, we are celebrating this Vesak also because of this feeling for the tradition, not just for the mere ritual. We are not doing it out of a sense of duty, or we have to do it because it is part of the Buddhist tradition in that sense. But it is a beautiful tradition of recollecting the Buddha's contribution to humanity, the significance of Vesak, the significance of his complete enlightenment, what it means for all of us as Buddhists and for all sentient beings, I would say, in existence now. So we are here to perpetuate this tradition, and we are doing it out of our love, affection, respect, gratitude to the Buddha and to the Dhamma that he has left behind for us. Right. I hope this talk will not drag on for too long, but for every Buddhist ceremony, I emphasize the Dharma aspect, the spiritual aspect, much more than the external physical aspects of the procedures. So, like in Sri Lanka is a good example. You want to take part in any ceremony, whether it is an auspicious one, whether it's a funeral, whether it's a very so-called ordinary ceremony of receiving a dana, they make it a point to preach the Dhamma. And we want to stress through our action. That's why we are celebrating it today. Okay. Another thing is, I was very grateful to a very highly respected, great speaker yesterday who talked about the importance of what he called original Buddhism. And his emphasis was that my teaching, my writing on original Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism should be translated into Chinese. I greatly appreciate that. Indeed, the teaching in the Pali Canon form the foundation of my own thinking and understanding of the Buddha, and my frame of orientation in my existence ever since I came into touch with the early teaching. But I like to add that actually in the University of Hong Kong, I never taught Theravada Buddhism. If you look at the programs there, when I was a professor, I taught Yogacara, I taught Sanskrit, I taught Northern Abhidharma. There's the Abhidharma in the Sanskrit text and in the Chinese text. Not that I didn't want to, I would have loved to teach Theravada Buddhism and Pali Buddhism, but there were already other professors doing it. And when I came, of course, we had the great Venerable Anuruddha, and then of course followed by Professor Karnadasa and others. So in a sense, I didn't have a chance to express myself as a Buddhist who bases himself on the authentic teaching of the historical Buddha. And that's what I'm going to stress in this center, our little Buddha-Dharma center. But at the same time, you can see that from the subject that I have taught, from the books and from my writing, my articles, you can see that my attitude is non-sectarian. And that is what I want to add. The true discerning of the Buddha, this is what is given as the title. The true understanding of Dhamma must be through an attitude of non-sectarianism. We cannot be just confined to one particular school, be it Theravada or Mahayana or Tantrayana. That is our, if you like, our policy here. And that's why in our structure, in the program structure, you can see that all these three aspects I emphasize. I myself taught and praised and highlighted the greatness of Mahayana, for example, in all my lectures. And expressed my deep feeling with regard to the ideal of the Bodhisattva. That, of course, I don't confine it to just Mahayana. It's an ideal that I think that should be followed by all Buddhists. We don't need to talk about this yana against that yana. Yeah. So this is one of the things I wanted to add on to what I briefly touch on, or I left out because of time constraint yesterday. Right, today we are here, and in fact, in the last, I think, 2 occasions, we could not celebrate Vesak because of the virus situation. We could not do it. I wonder so much. So this time, somehow or other, I just simply wanted to let it happen here. And some people may not like the way I do things, and they say, oh, this is not a time to invite people here to have celebrations and so on. Of course, I have to be objective and realistic, and I judge the situation now. It's basically, I think, we are fortunately more or less out of this, at least this particular wave of the virus problem, which is not to say that we need not be very cautious. Today we are doing it very cautiously also, and we ask the devotees to observe the wearing of masks and distancing and so on. But as I said, overwhelmed that in spite of all this, in spite of no publicity at all, people came, and they came even after a very tiring day yesterday. Yeah. So coming back to my emphasis on non-sectarianism, but then people may ask, if you emphasize that, why do you hold so many celebrations according to the Theravada tradition? Actually, what we are doing is not simply just a Theravada tradition. This is what I want to make you understand. This is the Indian tradition. And the Indian tradition is chosen because it unifies all Buddhist schools, Buddhist sects. All schools of Buddhism, whether it is Sri Lankan Buddhism, Thai Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, Tibetan, all have their root in Indian Buddhism. If they don't go back to the root, then it is not Buddhism. Then it is something, it's a distorted form, if you like, of the Dhamma, not even the true Dhamma. So it is from that perspective that while on the one hand, I consistently emphasize non-sectarianism, the non-sectarian approach to our understanding of the Dhamma and the Buddha, at the very same time, I do emphasize the importance of understanding the teaching of the historical Buddha that we find today. We would say, at least in terms of religious documents, in the Pali canons, and also in the Chinese Agama text. But I believe that the true essence of the Buddha's teaching, through Buddha-Dharma, is also contained within the text of other traditions, like the Chinese Mahayana text, the Tibetan text. Yeah, so that's why I emphasize that to have a proper perspective, a proper in-depth understanding of the Dhamma and a proper in-depth experience of the Dhamma, we have to be non-sectarian. And so that explains why, in spite of this emphasis and approach, we want to introduce the early tradition, the Indian tradition, to the Buddhists in Hong Kong and in the Greater China also. And that is also why I, took the great trouble to transport this image of the Buddha from Sri Lanka. It's very heavy. And I bought it, and of course with the help of the devotees here. Buying it was easy, but transporting it on plane is extremely difficult. They declined to do it, many airlines. And finally I found one that charged huge amount of money. So I just simply wanted one that represents Indian Buddhism. And the Sri Lankan image happens to be one of the closest in this respect. And also that's why our setup, you can see that of course you have Tibetan Tantra here also, and Mahayana form of Sakyamuni, but you can see the central emphasis on the historical Buddha. Yeah. The next point I want to share with you on this occasion is the importance of ritual, which is simplified by what we are doing, though in a simpler way, but it's a very important occasion for us to make it, to experience the Dhamma, to make it a spiritual practice. Whether an ordinary celebration or any action is spiritual or not, what is the criteria? The criteria is your own transformation. The criteria is mindfulness. If you are aware, you don't do it mechanically, you don't do it out of a sense of just duty or fulfillment of expectation of tradition. You do it from your heart, your whole being. If you like, to borrow a not very popular Buddhist phrase, to your whole soul is put into it, then even a simple act of making a donation, offering food to Sangha, or a celebration like this, instantly becomes a spiritual practice. So let's bear this in mind. Now, to be a Buddhist, the Buddha has taught us that we have to understand the Dhamma and apply the Dhamma to transform ourselves. This transformation process is not the easy one, and it's not always, exponentially progressive. Sometimes we slip, we fall down. In fact, very often we do, and we have to struggle. But the practice of Dhamma means the transformation of your whole being. If not, then it is not the practice of Dhamma. So to be a Buddhist is not just having a name through your refuge ceremony or calling yourself, labeling yourself as a Buddhist, etc. But it's whether within you there is this commitment, and this word I want to have, a commitment to the transformation of yourself, and if you like, at the same time, transformation of the whole world, the whole realm of sentient beings, right? Through the frame of orientation known as the Dhamma. That is said by applying the Dhamma. To transform ourselves, first of all, we have to understand that according to the Buddha teaching, we are not just the brain. We don't simply have just a computer in our neurons. A human being is comprised of the 5 aggregates. Now you can see on the screen now. This is basic Buddhism. Whether you call yourself Theravadan or Mahayana or Tibetan Buddhist or any Buddhist, you find this basic Buddhist teaching of the 5 skandhas, the 5 aggregates of Mwana. First is the physical aspect, and then sensation or feeling, and then ideation, often translated as perceptions. I prefer the word ideation. And then conditionings, in plurals, all the volitional forces, and then consciousness. So to transform yourself, to transform a human being means not just learning intellectually, understanding the doctrines of Buddhism. Understanding is one thing. Your whole being must be transformed. That means, according to the teaching, your feelings, your ideations, your volitions, your perception must be all transformed. Then only you can talk about transferring yourself through the Dhamma. And we must remember that. Often people do forget in the modern context. They are interested in learning philosophy. They are interested in going to classes, interested in talking about it, arguing about Buddhism. But honestly, we must commit ourselves to this transformation of the whole being. Ask yourself, are you doing it in the way that you can? Today is time above all times to be mindful of this aspect, to transform our total being, not just our intellect, but our emotions, our volitions, our, finally, consciousness. As we know, in the experience of human being, very often, if not always, our feelings and emotions are much stronger than our intellectual conclusions and understanding. There are so many things we know we should do, but we can't do successfully. So many things we know we should not do, but we cannot prevent them from happening within us. I often sometimes compare this to one exclamation by St. Paul, as I understand in Christianity. So he said something to the effect that what I will, what I know that I do not. something like that. What I do not, that I will. In other words, we want to. For instance, we want to do wholesome work all the time, but we cannot succeed. We want to abstain from unwholesome practices or actions, but often we fail. That is the tragedy of human being. That's what dukkha is. This is part of it. 就係所謂苦就係在呢度啦，就係情感同埋理智嘅衝突。This is human experience. So in this experience, we can see that, unlike in the case of the Buddha, Buddha is fully integrated in terms of his understanding, that is his wisdom, and his emotionality. In particular, his love and compassion. So his wisdom and compassion are one, fully one. And his knowing and being are fully one. So he gives a明行足啦. That is Vicha Charana Sampanna. His Vicha is his action. His Vicha is his wisdom. And Charana is his actions. So his actions are natural expression of his fully integrated, harmonious, enlightened mind. That is to say, his wisdom. We are not like that. So in the case of Buddha, he doesn't have to say, oh, I must not do like this, this is no good, I must be kind. He cannot help being kind. He naturally would not commit evil. And this is transformation of the whole being that I'm talking about. To do this, of course, there are many ways, and let's hope that we must be mindful of this and do not spend all our time just attending lectures and courses and reading books. Learn to feel as a Buddhist. I said the word again, to feel. Learn to touch your heart. And that way you can transcend your ego also. People sometimes think because I have money, I have to be special, or I'm successful, I have to be respected. I'm learned, I'm different from others. In fact, I might relate one little episode to you. When recently, I think a couple of years ago, when I went to Sri Lanka, 2-3 years ago, one Buddhist monk, a colleague of ours in the University of California, he interviewed me, and there was, I think the interview is on the internet, and he asked me one question. Basically what he meant was, I forgot exactly the wording, but effectively it was like this, that, I was a good scholar and, a great teacher. But now after coming to Hong Kong, then I find that, according to him, that I have to, do rituals and perform ceremonies to fulfill the need of the devotees. I immediately stopped him. No, that's a wrong understanding of me. I don't see that, like for instance today celebrating the Vesak, it's just my duty, and I happen to be in charge of the Buddha-Dharma Center, and then I must do it. No. It's out of my heart I want to do it. That is why this few days I was extremely busy. Yesterday I was exhausted. But I want to do it this morning. And I want to give the talk to share my feelings. In fact, I wish I have more time and energy. People understand me just as a professor, as a scholar. But I lead people together to bow down to worship the Buddha. And that's very important. If our heart, our feeling are not touched, then a great part of our human nature is deprived of, is ignored. We're not true human being if we just rely on your intellect, your brain, your thinking. In fact, many so-called psychological problems today, and these problems are mostly, I must say, imported from the West, from our Western conditioning. And that is not to blame the Westerners. They have wonderful, great culture, and we can learn many great things. But it's our own fault. The Asian mentality, the Chinese mentality. Why? The Chinese is a great tradition. The Sinhalese is a great tradition. Bangladesh is a great tradition. Thai is a great tradition. Asians is a great tradition. Why do we have to? We are not in touch, because the thing is, we are annihilated. We are not in touch with our own traditions, own values. And we look up to the Westerners. Whatever they do is the standard. So that way we are not in touch with our whole being, our own feelings. So I think there should be more awareness of this. Talking about transforming, developing our emotional aspect as a Buddhist, there are of course more than one way, several ways. And what I want to emphasize today is a celebration like what is happening today, even though in a simple way, if done mindfully, is an important channel for us to develop our emotions, to elevate our feeling emotion, the Buddhists, to higher levels. And this brings me to another remark, and that is the misunderstanding, misinterpretation by many modern exponents of Pali Buddhism, and not everybody, luckily, but enough learned, intelligent exponents who claim that the Buddha has taught the Sila Pata Paramasa as the third fetter, meaning that, according to their translation, usually, attachment to rites and rituals is a fetter that prevents us from liberation. That is a gross misrepresentation of the teaching of the historical Buddha. Sila Pada Paramasa. Recently, I had the occasion to talk about this in my class. And if you come to my class, you realize that it's not just a mere teaching of the text or the language, and we don't ignore that. We cover all the grammar and so on, but I share my feelings in all my lectures as Buddhist. Yeah, and I relate all what I teach and what I learn as a Buddhist to my human experience as a human being. So we must understand this instruction of the Buddha. Sila Pata Paramasa. Sanskrit is Shila Vrta Paramarsha. That is the clinging or attachment to what is called Shila and Vrta. Shila is not just a precept that we ordinarily understand. It's what the Buddha was referring to in that context is or was the kind of irrational religious practices in his time. And some of these practices still remain that you can see in India. You know, Sila is nature. It's certain behavior, certain practices. Like for instance, some very sincere practitioners in India, even today, they make vow. They say, if I live like a cow, or if I keep my hairs without cutting it from my whole life, without cutting my nails, then I am following the path of liberation. I'll be liberated. Clearly, this is completely irrational, and clearly it is a hindrance to spiritual progress. Vrta means vow, making vows. I must do like this, I must do like that, and then without mindfulness, without proper understanding whether is this the right way to liberation. In the case of the Buddha, when he was struggling as a bodhisattva, we know that he practiced various things, and he went to the Brahmanica teachers also, and he learned a lot from them. But he realized that a lot of very important, you might say, spiritual delusions and wrong practices that prevent a human being from being liberated. For instance, the belief in the soul, Atma. That's why the Buddha emphasized anatta. And the Buddha spent 6 years practicing asceticism. And that was part of the tradition at that time. These are the irrational practices and behaviors. Vrata means those observances. You make vows to do this and that in an irrational way. But vow is extremely, extremely important in Buddhism. And we are grateful that the Mahayana tradition, in fact, brings out this point much more than, in a way, than the Theravada tradition in this respect. It's the vow that we must sublimate, that must be made in a positive way, spiritual way, to uplift us to higher dimensions, higher level experiences. A bodhisattva, in spite of all the great, innumerable difficulties in his or her path of trying to save sentient beings, right? He can struggle. He doesn't lose his inspiration. That's because of the vow. It's the vow that propels him or her. So that's why every bodhisattva at the very beginning makes a set of vows. We know that. Like the 4 great vows, for instance, or Siddhikarava's vow, and so on, you see. Without making a vow at the beginning of the career, then he is not a bodhisattva. And once again, this is not just Mahayana. I see this as an important teaching of the Buddha. At least we can understand by implication that we need to. Now, talking about the 5 skandha, you can see, for instance, the sankhara aspect, the volition aspect, the vow aspects is extremely important. That's why even in Theravada ceremonies, you can see that, and we're going to do that also. The making of vow aspirations, for instance, Kalyan Mitata, for moksha, and the transfer of merits, and so on. These are important practices among the Theravadins, very strong Theravadins. So this is not Mahayana or Theravada or anything like that, anything sectarian. So, very briefly, because I don't drag on too long, the teaching of Sila Pata Paramasa is not as mistranslated and misrepresented by many Buddhist scholars. It's not a teaching that attachment to rite and ritual. It's not to belittle, to disparage rites and rituals. Because rites and rituals sometimes are much more powerful than reading a book. You feel it through the ritual. When you bow in front of the Buddha, some people say, I'm a good Buddhist, I can close my doors and, I don't need to take refuge, I don't need to go to the Buddha, the temple, I don't need to burn incense, I'm a clever, intelligent Buddhist. This is just their own ego trips, delusion. When you come to a temple like today, you can feel it. The atmosphere is very different. Your whole psychological state is very different. Everything conducive to your transformation. You see the Buddha, then without me giving you a lecture, unfortunately I'm speaking too much maybe, without having to do that, you feel directly when you look at the Buddha and flowers are offered to him, everybody has feeling today, fruits are offered to him, and everybody is bowing in front of him. The professor is leading everybody to bow down, and we sing eulogies of him, praise him. This is ritual. When ritual is done rationally and mindfully in this way, you are being transformed. You can't be transformed inside your room. These people will never succeed. They think they are good Buddhists, but they're only good Buddhists in the brain maybe, and not in the heart. You can't even start walking on the path of the Dhamma without motivating your heart. If your heart is not moved, you will never move. In spite of your understanding, this is one, this is good, I agree. Your agreement, your mind, intellectually is one thing. Are you going to walk the path? A difficult path. Are you going to be prepared to slip and fall down and then again get up every day? falling down every day. So all this requires such means like rituals and vow. As I said already, I've mentioned that. If we learn to make vows all the time, we might say that a good Buddhist is one whose mentality is constantly one of making vows. Then you feel very much in touch with human potentiality for higher developments. Very much in touch with yourself as a human being. You feel that there are hopes in the midst of all your so-called depression, frustrations, and problems. Sometimes you feel that there's nothing else I can do. We can do. What can I do? I know I can understand, but problems arise in me. Unhappy feeling, sadness arise in me. What can one do? What can we do? What can you do? In this circumstance, one practice you can do is to make vows in a spiritual way, within the context of your religion. So vow is extreme importance. So you can see that in this way, rituals, people who, unfortunately now because of this misunderstanding in Theravada Buddhism, many Theravada Buddhists are very cold, aloof. They're not involved. No, of course I'm a good Buddhist. I don't have to be like them. I'm different. They think they are different. They forget that they are still a human being. A human being, according to Buddha, have 5 skandhas. The emotion is always stronger, the Buddha has told us. If not, the Buddha would have just told us once, recommend you to do like this, live like that. That's finished, and you will be a Buddha or you'll be an Arhat tomorrow. It's not like that. So today is time for us to ponder over this teaching of the Buddha, to learn to celebrate Vesak, and making use of this celebration to express our feeling again, love, affection, respect to the Buddha and the teaching. There are a lot more I want to say. I think it's already too long, so I'm going to stop here. But just very quickly, maybe one more point I must make very quickly. Now, there is one teaching of the Buddha, of the so-called 4 reliances, 叫做4依譬如話依法不依人啦，依義不依民啦，大家知道啊？仲有咩咧？依止不依識啦，依了義不依不了義啦，呢叫4依嘛。These 4 reliances. Very briefly, since we don't have time, this is the one that I want to emphasize today. It's just only one, because if we expound on this, I have done that in other contexts, it would take me 2 hours. So this one is here. I express it in the Sanskrit form. Jnana pratisaranena bhavitavyam na vijnana pratisaranena. 中文叫依智不依識啊。For those who know the Chinese, you can see it immediately, and those who know Sanskrit, you can understand. It means that to understand the Dhamma, I emphasize the word Dharma, not because I'm a rebellion Theravadan, but because I want to show the non-sectarian aspect. Because the word Dharma includes the word Dhamma, in a sense. It's more inclusive, and it's non-sectarian in that sense. If you just say Dhamma, then you will be misunderstood as just being, completely emphasizing only the Pali tradition. Okay, so there are many profound ways to understand this. For instance, it means that we must not, to understand the Dharma, we must not rely on our conditioned cognitions, conditioned understanding of things, of the Dharma, but we must we must rely on wisdom, That is true spiritual insight， 唔係通過我哋普通嘅認知，因為我哋普通認知都係受過種種嘅不善嘅分集嘅。我哋冇真正嘅自由，我哋以為我哋有自由選擇，其實我哋所謂選擇咧係咩咧？係因為種種嘅分集啊，咁自然嘅一種反應，嗰種反應往往係一種負面嘅反應。所以我哋要理解個真理咧，要理解佛説佛法咧，我哋要通過我哋嘅所謂智慧啦。所以智慧同埋知識係唔同嘅。So this is the one important way to understand it. But today I want to emphasize a related way of understanding it. It's not the only way, but relevant to what we are emphasizing. And that is that we must experience ourselves. To understand ourselves is also not easy. We think we understand ourselves. We think we understand people around us, our parents, our father, our people we love, and children. And often we don't, because we base our understanding on our conditioned responses. We think this person like that, but after 20 years, you begin to think, oh, now I finally understand him. But sometimes it's too late. So, to understand ourselves, to discern ourselves, it's not easy. Let's still to discern the Buddha, and this is what we want to do on an occasion like this. In fact, it should be done every day. We have to discern the Buddha not just through our intellectual understanding from the books, from the suttas, from a Pali grammar, from our tradition. All these are conditioned way of cognizing the Buddha, cognizing the Dhamma. This is the understanding through what is called vijnana. 就係呢個叫做識啦。We have to understand at higher and higher levels, right, through spiritual practice, and with the increasing level of spiritual insight that we gain as a practicing Buddhist. Without practice, you cannot transform yourself. You talk about enlightenment, you talk about Nibbana as if you understand. Do you really? You can only have glimpses, deeper and deeper glimpses as you progress. And this progress means you must transform your intellect, your whole, not the intellect, your whole mental makeup, your whole consciousness. And ideally, finally, transforming consciousness into spiritual wisdom. So this is what it emphasized in Yogacara Buddhism. This is called Asya Pravritti. Your 8 consciousnesses are transformed into wisdom. And that word there in that context is jhana. So jhana here is not just ordinary knowledge. It refers to spiritual wisdom. So according to the Yogacara expression, 就係轉聽得明嘛？轉識成智，呢個智唔係普通嘅智啦，唔係嗰啲 intellectual 嗰啲理性嘅智啦，就係智慧啦。所以呢個智同就係慧嘅意思，係 within this context. And this can only be achieved through, as I've said at the beginning, the total transformation of whole being. Because you don't just, how do you transform, how do you elevate your intellectual understanding? Don't look down upon, don't dispense with the intellectual understanding. You need that. But at the higher and higher levels, and more approximating, if you like, spiritual wisdom and insight. That is true practice. And this practice must be one that transforms your whole being, your whole emotionality, and not just your intellectual understanding. That is why the Buddha says, if you want to understand his Dharma, and as a Buddhist, that's what you should do. If you want to truly practice according to the Dhamma, then you must rely on these transformed high and high degrees of spiritual insight through the Buddhist path, and not just at the level of mere intellectual understanding. And to transform this, we have to involve our whole being, our emotion and feelings. And this, we can say, is the way to discern the Buddha. To feel the Buddha, not just to think about the Buddha. Whatever you think are in terms of intellectual categories, concepts, which are all man-made and often egotistically made, contrived. So we have to transform our so-called consciousness, our vijnana, more and more into spiritual jhana, more and more into spiritual insight, by making use of practices like rituals, devotions, developing our faith, our gratitude, love to the Buddha and Dhamma, like today what we are trying to do. I think that's enough. The other things I have jotted down here, there are so many things, and I think we'll have to conclude here and proceed to other aspects of the ritual.